Alrighty. So we are 4 days away from the beginning of the 11th anniversary. It starts on Monday. So that's exciting. In the meantime, we got some new weapons, the Dragon Kings series, and they're pretty good. So I'm going to go over whether or not you should spawn this, how many gems it'll most likely take, and all that stuff. So first, let's look at what the spawn is. So you get the first one's 15 gems, and you get 100 to 200. Second one is 20 gems, and the last one guarantees one of the new things. It gets you 100 to 200 gems. Total is total is 75 gems to get the entire thing. You'll want to spawn this roughly 10 times, as we can see from the exchange. You need 3,600, and you're going to be getting roughly 360 per 75 gems spawn. So you probably want around 750 gems, or 75 plus that. So what is that? 825 gems. So yeah, 750 to 825 gems is how much you'll want. Now, each of these does have its own ability, weapon ability. So I'll go over those individually as well. So the ability proc on these is very, very good. It is a 7XL to ability power. It ignores 50% of the target's defense. It uses pulverize, which pierces invulnerability and nullification effects, and increases status ailment value by 4XL. So that is a very high amount. Actually, let me go check how much that is. That is a lot. It is 75 success value up, which is really, really nice for landing specific types of debuffs. It maxes out at XL and stacks on light weapons, which is really nice, with a maximum of 3. So that's pretty easy to stack. Each of these has a special Unison ability. I'll go over each of these individually later. So these procs, just in general, are really, really good for piercing, for PvP, specifically for abilities that pierce, damage reduction, and damage reflection. So there are 4 types of damage downs. I guess technically 5, but I'll go over 4 of them, the main ones. So you have damage reflection and damage reduction. Those are kind of grouped together. And then you have damage nullification and damage invulnerability. Damage nullification is like reducing damage to 0. Same thing with invulnerability. It basically reduces the damage to 0. Both of those are the 2 groups. So most procs will fall under these 2 groups. Now I'm going to be talking about the defense gear that these have that comes out of a different group. It is a percent damage down group. So that's the last one, and that one can't be ignored. But these can ignore damage reduction, damage reflection, damage nullification, and damage invulnerability if you use them properly. So for example, some classes, we'll go over here, like Lancer, has specific abilities that penetrate damage reflection and damage reduction. So if you use an ability like this, like Riot Break, and you proc this that pierces invulnerability and nullification, you will be proccing all of the main types of damage reduction that are possible, all of the damage procs for defense gear. And you will successfully be able to kill people almost always. There are going to be exceptions, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But generally speaking, these types of procs are super, super powerful if used correctly in PvP. This is a 100% PvP type proc. So just be aware of that. When you're using, generally, these types of procs are benefited most from these types of classes. Some of them from Zerker as well. Ninja has some, but mainly it's like these two classes. The Lancer and the Mage benefit greatly from these types of procs, as many of their abilities penetrate damage reduction and damage reflection. Same thing over here. They get damage reduction, damage reflection, piercing all of the time. So if you're a mage or a lancer and you're really looking to kill people, this is a good place to start. Some of their abilities as well for other, not this one. Is it like Evil Quake as well does that? I don't think, Mockingblade as well. So there are some abilities here as well for Zerkers. And there are many classes, many abilities do damage reduction, pierce, damage reduction, and damage reflection. It's not just limited to these classes, but mainly you'll see like these as the benefiting classes from this type of proc. Now, of course, you could always just pair this onslaught proc that pierces damage reflection or damage invulnerability and damage nullification. You can pair that proc with a ravaging proc that penetrates damage reflection and damage reduction. And then you can use almost any class. So for example, even rooks that have no ability to pierce damage reduction or damage reflection in any of their abilities, they can still benefit from these types of procs because you can pair them with other types of piercing procs and you can really put in some huge damage. So overall, these procs for things like PvP are 10 out of 10 for certain classes, and just in general, they're pretty nice. The 75 extra status ailment when using this is fantastic. There are some abilities that would really, really benefit from this type of proc, and I'll go over some of the big ones in just a little bit, but the 75 is really, really big. Some people have asked me before if this 50% ignoring damage, the defense or magic defense is any good. Generally speaking, in something like PvP, you won't even really recognize that you're ignoring it. Even in something like PvE, it's kind of hard to notice this because this is a really old type of proc. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's useless. It is quite good, but it is much better in PvE. And these are also really easy to stack. So in something like PvP or in guild battle, specifically in guild battle when you're trying to kill somebody, these are 10 out of 10 procs. Super, super powerful for many classes. Just make sure that you are using abilities that penetrate damage reduction and damage reflection when using this proc for maximum killing potential. Now, for something like PvE, this type of proc is really, it suffers greatly for two main reasons. This status ailment is basically useless. Most of the time when you're going against difficult bosses or difficult quests, the status ailment, this bonus success value is valuable in some cases. It used to be used in an ability like Blunt Stun to prevent the enemies from moving in really difficult quests. However, My understanding is that in really, really difficult quests, status ailments have been moved away from. And the main reason is because it appears as though in very, very difficult high level PvE quests, the enemies gain status ailment resistance permanently every time that you hit them with a status ailment. So eventually they'll be basically completely invulnerable. So I am kind of interested to see if this type of proc will do anything against that. And if you double proc it, having an extra 150% chance plus a main slot monster and boosted from other types of buffs, the likelihood of you landing debuffs is really low just in general on PvE monsters. So that kind of sucks. You're also missing some really, really important stuff for PvE. So for example, you're missing cost gain, you're missing uni gain, you're missing guaranteed crits, you're missing success value up. So for example, even if you are playing something like a Lancer, there's a high likelihood that as a Lancer, you'll use something like Lance Flash, as it is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. But notice that it only has a 70% success value, which means that there is a 30% chance that you just straight up miss. And missing is equivalent to doing no damage. So that's no bueno. Usually you would want to run abilities that boost ability power, or success value up. Let's see if I can find one. This is not one. I think this one does. Yeah, so increases physical and ability success value up by M. M is 20, so this is a boost of 20%. Now, you would usually want to pair this with something else, but 90% is way, way better than 70%. And the fact that these procs do not do that is pretty bad. Also, you have to consider, like I was saying earlier, there's no cost gain. And that is massive, because if you're using abilities that cost a lot, which all of the best abilities in the entire game use something like Lance Flash, which costs 25, there's hardly any classes that use low cost abilities. So really, this is a hard sell for something like PvE. Honestly, in something like PvE, I would only run 3 of these maximum, but I would probably not run more than 3. So that in that aspect, it's kind of a rough situation. I would probably run like 2 on average, but the elemental value isn't bad. And I'll talk about the Unison abilities. The Unison abilities are fantastic for PvE. So because of the Unison abilities, which I haven't talked about yet, I'm going to be saying that the proc overall is like a 6 out of 10 for something like PvE. But the Unison abilities boost that up. So overall, these weapons are like an 8 out of 10 for PvE. They really enable some classes. So let's talk about because I keep talking about it, but not really talking about it. Let's go over each one of these. So each one is a 10-second cooldown and costs 10 uni, and it will substitute your weapon ability. So if I'm playing a regular class, I would have an attack ability, and I would substitute that out for the uni ability. So let's go over each one, because they are all different. The first one hits 4 times at 100 ability power and boosts all allies' Unison gauge by 3. This is a pretty standard thing for soldiers. However, soldiers do not have a ton of abilities that hit 4 or more times and dual scale. So for soldiers, this is actually quite a powerful ability, and the low cooldown time makes it pretty viable. The low Unison cost as well makes it a pretty good ability. And overall, I think that this is quite powerful for soldiers. And I would probably end up using this most of the time in PvE. Sharp Fang does basically the same thing. However, it reduces defense and magic defense by 30%, which in my opinion is a little bit better, especially in something like PvE. You often don't need to uni boost your team. There are certain circumstances, like when you're trying to clear a really difficult quest as fast as possible. You want everyone to get uni as fast as possible. But in those cases, you probably won't be using a Unison ability anyway. So overall, though, this is a really nice ability because it helps round out the two abilities that Lancers have. They get Lance Flash plus Dragon's Bite. And then because Lance Flash reduces ability cooldowns, after using Lance Flash a few times, you can get really high ability cooldown rate. And so then you can just cycle between Lance Flash and Dragon's Bite. But early on, when you're just using Lance Flash, you don't have that ability cooldown. So this is a nice filler ability as you ramp up as a Lancer. So I really like this ability for Lancers. Now for Archers, they kind of get the short end of the stick in a way. Hits 5 times at 130 ability power and then 1 time at 250. Increases cost recovery speed by 5 for 10 seconds, all allies. That is really, really powerful. At least it used to be really powerful. It is still kind of powerful. The ability to hit 6 times is really what makes this good. The unfortunate part is that it scales off of attack and magic attack and attack alone. I mean, it is something that you would still want. Like, generally speaking, when you're running an archer or a dual blade person, you generally want attack, magic attack. So in that aspect, it's good. But the ability power is low. The number of hits is good. I have been playing a lot of Morpher, and I stack attack, magic attack, defense, and magic defense all as stats that I use. So in that aspect, I probably wouldn't use this. But it actually is a pretty strong ability. I think that I like this ability more than the dual blades. But I'll get to the dual blades in a little bit. So the staff, this one is really, really powerful. And the reason is because right now, specifically staff type mages are really struggling to get a full set of abilities that are powerful for PvE. This is a really nice rounding ability for you. You'll be able to get an extra ability that will help you increase your damage and consistently pump out high quality damage. 110 ability power is on the low side. Hitting 4 times is good though. Scaling with magic attack and magic defense is excellent. And the fact that you reduce defense and magic defense by 30% means that you can use this in conjunction with some of the new abilities like Knight's Fall to really debuff the enemies to minus 80%, which is massive for some PvE situations. So in many ways, I think that this is a must-have for specifically mages who are staff mages who are trying to use some of the new abilities that staff mages have gotten. This is basically a requirement, and it does boost the mage's ability to do high quality damage in PvE by a lot. Getting an extra ability that's pretty cheap is good. The next one is the relic. The relic is basically the same thing. It's a little bit lower ability power, and hits 4 times, magic defense, magic attack. This is the part that really sucks. I don't know why A-Team does this, but they think that relics are equivalent to Unison. Clerics have always had this ability to lock Unisons. This is completely useless in PvE. So it's kind of weird to have this on an ability like... it's just weird. I'm thinking about... If you compare this ability, for example, with a previous ability that reduces defense and magic defense by 30% and does the extra 10 ability power, the relic really is just straight up worse in PvE. However, this is kind of a weird ability because in PvP it could be really good, and in something like guild battles it could also be extremely powerful. So think about it like this. You have a success value rate of 120, which is already one of the best in the entire game for Prohibit Unison. Plus, the ability itself gives you a bonus 75% status ailment success value. So if you single proc, you're at 195. If you double proc, you're at what is that? 280? You're at 280. That's crazy to think about. 280 Unison or success value on a Prohibit Unison in something like guild battles or PvP is unbelievably good. You'll basically always land it. So in that aspect, I kind of do like this, but it's weird because you don't want to do too much damage to them. Like if you're running a really high damage magic attack, magic defense cleric, or if like a mage or something like that, this ability kind of sucks. Now, where I do find value in this ability is if you're running a frontline cleric in guild battles and you're using abilities to just cleanse your teammates. If things go south, you could always try to use this ability to lock one of the enemies down and prevent them from unioning. Like if they start killing some of your teammates, you could potentially attack them. And if you build a specific cleric that has really low magic attack and magic defense, and you're basically just a cleansing cleric, this could be very valuable. It's a really interesting ability. I don't think it'll be used a whole lot. In fact, I'd be shocked if it was used ever in guild battles, but it's a really interesting idea. And I think it has potential. Now, in something like PvE, though, it's like, you know. I mean, it's not a bad rounding ability because it just does nice damage. But I don't think, like for mages, it would be good if you're running a relic mage. Nobody's running damage cleric, so that's like, you know, you'd never see that. But I suppose it would be good if you were running a damage cleric. And I'm really struggling to come up with any other instances where you would even want to use this. Basically, the only thing I can think of is if you're running a mage, but you're using books and relics. So in that instance, it would be okay. But yeah, you're really suffering because you're just missing out on that second piece. Now, the dual blades, I kind of talked about these earlier. Hits 3 times at 120, hits 3 times at 150, applies grief. The applies grief is really good. I just don't like that the ability power on these is significantly lower than the ability power on the bow. The fact that the bow is 130 on all of them, except for one, which is at 250, is crazy. Also for general questing, increased cost is going to be way more powerful, specifically because in general PvE quests, you're just going to be killing enemies. So applying something like grief is not going to be nearly as valuable. However, in really high level PvE quests that you are, so if you're fighting the same boss monster for, you know, potentially a minute, applying grief and basically permanently keeping grief on the enemy is massive. You'll be doing so much more damage. So it's a weird one. It's a really weird one. I think that this is a very powerful ability, and you can use this in conjunction with some of the abilities from Archer, however, you can't use this in conjunction with abilities from the ninja because ninjas can't use this. And really, grief is applied from ninjas. It's one of their core aspects. So it's kind of disappointing to see that this isn't a, like, you know, it's not a ninja ability that they can benefit from, but it is kind of an interesting idea. And I would have to see it in action to know if it was a really good ability. But the ability power of these is not, you know, significantly worse. And, you know, I think it's fine. Now, going on to one of the most powerful defense gears in the entire game. I'll talk about both. They are basically the same thing, and I'll go over each of them. But one of them is magic, and one of them is physical. So this reduces physical damage taken by XL is actually something that goes, it's a 40% reduction. Percent as in percentage of damage taken, which means if you double proc this, you'd be getting 80% damage reduction, and it would basically be equivalent to a guard. Now, the way that I kind of recognize that these procs are percentages is because you'll notice there's no text that says scales with a number of abilities. This is the same text that you'll find on other abilities, which makes it really, really confusing. So for example, this one, you'll see the same exact wording reduces physical damage and magical damage taken by XL plus. However, this one says specifically that the damage reduction scales with the amount. So right there, we can see it's damage reduction. So this is a damage reduction proc. Now there are procs that have both of them, but that's just a general way to tell. If it does not have any type of scaling like that, then it is just a pure percentage. Now you can always reach out to me on Discord or whatever and ask me. But generally speaking, it's kind of confusing. When this is level 7, it actually goes up to 45%. And so you can get up to 90% damage reduction. And this is currently the only way to prevent getting one shot in something like PvP. So for example, if I were to proc this, that it ignores damage reflection and damage invulnerability and nullification. And if I was to use an ability like this on an enemy that ignores damage reduction, damage reflection, none of their normal defense procs would do anything. However, like for example, if I procced this, the damage reduction is going to get ignored. If I procced damage nullification like this, that would get ignored. Now, from the proc itself, not the ability, the proc. So I'm still reducing the damage incoming, and that is important to note. However, it is more important that, like, once you reach a certain amount of stats, it doesn't really matter. However, if I were to proc 2 of these, I could potentially reduce the damage taken by 90%, which is massive. These are basically only for PvP. Now, the biggest drawback from this type of proc, as you can see, is that it only does physical damage. And then there's one for magical as well. And they only proc on physical damage taken. The other one procs only on magical damage taken. Now, the ability power reduction is really nice, but you've probably noticed one of the flaws of this ability is an ability that hits with multiple types. So this one here we go. Fortune Bullet. Random physical or magical damage. And so this is where this type of a proc really, really struggles. Even though it is technically one of the most powerful abilities to reduce incoming damage. And is the only way to survive in certain circumstances against really powerful opponents, there are still ways to get through this. Abilities that do multiple forms of damage, like a physical and magical, the most that you can proc is 45% damage reduction on physical and 45% damage reduction on magical, or you could double proc one of them. So you'd basically be taking 100% of physical or magical damage, and then you'd be taking 10% of the other type of damage. So against dual types of abilities, this ability really does, these types of defense procs really fall short. The best way to prevent that is to run something like Soldier and help to stack damage, the percent damage reductions. These are pretty good as well for just reducing ability power overall. They are some of the highest ability power, if not the highest ability power reductions in the entire game. You also have to keep in mind that these only proc on an L chance, which is not good. That is 30% divided by 2 if it's not in the main slot, so 15%. It's pretty bad. Most defense procs are going to be XL. So this is a defense proc. Really, you're using this for PvP. And something like PvP, these procs are 10 out of 10. They're basically the only way to successfully survive in many situations. Competitively in PvP. In something like Guild Battle, they're not nearly as good. They still have value, but the main reason why they're not going to be nearly as powerful is mainly because if somebody wants you dead in guild battles, you're probably going to be dead anyway. And it's better to use strategy like DS, in my opinion, to help survive against incoming damage than it is to try to rely on defense procs. However, in something like guild battles, if you were put in a situation where it could mean life or death, these are still probably 10 out of 10 procs, and I'd still use them. I just don't like the proc chance. Now, all of that said, we'll move over to the PvE side of things. These are horrible for PvE. As you can probably tell, as the fact that they don't reduce damage, they don't reflect damage, they don't nullify damage, and they don't make damage invulnerable. It's just a percentage. These are quite unreliable. The proc chance is also low. Generally speaking, in something like PvE, the best way to survive is to just double proc defense gear. And it doesn't really matter what the defense gear is most of the time. Of course, we could talk about ability power reduction being one of the most powerful things in the game. But generally speaking, if you just double proc defense gear, you're going to survive. If you don't proc at all and you have low defense or magic defense, you're probably just dead anyway. This type of proc isn't really going to save you, and it's not great in PvE. So in that aspect, I'd probably say it's like a 4 or a 5 out of 10. There are certain circumstances. For example, if you were up against a really, really powerful monster, a really, really powerful PvE monster, and it was like a 1v1, or if it was a 5v1, and you knew ahead of time what the most powerful abilities were from that monster, whether or not they were physical or magical abilities, and then you specifically chose abilities like the procs to main slot against those, you have a better chance of surviving if you single proc or double proc these against that monster, against that specific ability that is extremely powerful. Now, all of that to be said, just so you're aware, I would still not recommend these for PvE unless you know what's going to happen, unless you are aware of the most powerful abilities and the typing on the most powerful abilities from a specific monster. I just don't like this type of proc for PvE. Now, the ability power is really, really valuable from this. So in some aspects, I do like it, but yeah. It's something that I would not use in PvE. So again, I'm going to keep it at like a 4 or 5. out of 10. So overall, do I think that this is worth spawning? For new players, it's probably worth spawning, specifically if you want to be good at PvP. Now, keep in mind, you may need to spend much more than 750 gems in order to accumulate enough offensive and defensive procs to really be an all-around good PvE player. So, if you were a newer player or a free-to-play player and you were considering for example, if you had no good PvP stuff, if you had no good weapons, no good defense gear, and you wanted to go from that position to a very good PvPer, these abilities, these weapons are missing something. They don't have chipped blade on them, and they don't have, let's see. Oh, here. They don't have erosion either. So chipped blade is a specific debuff. It's a special debuff that ignores the damage reduction, damage reflection part of an attack or proc. And erosion does the same thing for damage nullification and invulnerability. So in that aspect, I don't like these as the one-all catch-all for PvP, because you'll need to spawn an ability that has Shutter Strike or Shutter Step. It's a specific type of weapon ability like this that applies chipped blade, and it'll help out a lot. Now, I do like these in a lot of cases, especially if you're maining Lancer or Mage. I think that these could be extremely valuable. Just keep in mind that if you're going from nothing and you want to be a very good PvPer, you may need to spend around 1,500 gems in order to spawn enough gear to be able to successfully build some really good sets. Now, you could probably get a decent set with 750, but just to be aware of some of the limitations. It depends greatly on how many defense gears you get and how many of staffs or lances you get as well. The luck is going to be a massive case. Now, specifically if you're a mage, I think that this is mandatory to pick up just to grab the staff weapon ability. This one here, the weapon ability there, evil sorcery. Now, for long-time players, this will depend greatly on the class that you play. Like we've talked about, Lancers and Mages benefit greatly from this type of proc. And also, depending on whether or not you need this this type of defense gear, could also change the outcome. Excuse me, and whether or not you want to spawn this. But I do think that this is one of the best types of spawns for good PvP gear and sets and all of that stuff. So keep that in mind. And this will probably never come back, this spawn. The gear will probably come back later on, but it will never come back in this form. So just be aware of that. Yeah. And that's pretty much everything, guys. So I will catch you guys later.